Hello and welcome to Miraculous History Tonight. Here's your host, James Johnson.
Welcome back to History Tonight. As stated, this is actually Miraculous History Tonight. Unfortunately, due to our current situation in the world, we are unable to bring our guests back from the past into our studio. And since we currently are in between studios right now, Electro Ninja has been kind enough to allow me to use his backdrop as my studio. And don't worry, eventually we will be getting our own studio. But for now, this is what we have. Now, since we don't have our guests actually coming in to tell us about themselves, instead we have done a little bit more research and have given you our information through our mouths, rather than through the mouths of the people themselves. Our first guest is none other than the son of Zeus himself, Hercules, or as his Greek name was, Hercules. Now, of course, we are going to be referring to him as Hercules due to the fact that Hercules is the more well-known name, both here in America as well as in several other countries, mostly due to the fact that the Disney movie is called Hercules, even though they use all of the other Greek names, but also because of the fact that the other show that we will be using a lot to base our information off of is also called Hercules. This show is a live-action TV show that that has a lot of the accurate information. As such, we did make sure that we checked other sources as well, but it has a lot of semi-accurate information on the actual mythos of Hercules, as well as a few other bits and pieces of information that are rather important. This Hercules is a live-action series that does have a cartoon movie alongside his co-series, along with his sister series, Xena, the Warrior Princess. As such, we aren't 100% certain if Xena will be making an appearance eventually in Miraculous. However, due to the fact that Hercules has appeared, we will be mentioning her briefly in this video. Now then, let's get into who Hercules was. The simple fact of the matter is that if you are only familiar with the Disney version of Hercules, that is not accurate. While Zeus is always Hercules' father, his mother is never Hera. Zeus was honestly disgusting and slept with a lot of mortal women. As such, Hercules is mortal, well, half mortal, due to the fact that his mother was a young woman whose husband happened to be at war at the time. When he came back, he was shocked to see that she had supposedly had sex with him, but it was actually Zeus in disguise, and it's a whole bunch of just chaos that we don't really have time to get into. Instead, we will be focusing more on Hercules in his later life, as well as his family. The first thing to note is Zeus and Hera, along with their brothers, Hades and Poseidon. These four would most likely have been top of the line miraculous users, as in the top 5 Miraculouses. One for lightning being Zeus, one for fire being Hades, and one for water being that of Poseidon. While Hera is a bit uncertain, I would assume that she had something to do with something similar to the Peacock Miraculous, being that of something releasing a form of senti-monster. However, we're going to call them just monsters, just for ease. Now, the simple fact of the matter is that Hercules would have been born after the Miraculouses had started to appear. Zeus, as well as the other the other miraculous holders have clearly been miraculous holders for probably, give or take, a few hundred years. Maybe less, but they have been holding them for a few years. As well as, I'm willing to state that Zeus was the guardian of the miraculous box at the time. Many of these miraculouses would then be passed on to all of their children, those being people like Ares and Aphrodite and many, many more. A good assumption is that Taurus would have been given to Ares, and Aquarius would have been given to Aphrodite. I'm honestly uncertain if the twin dragons would have actually been coming into the whole rotation at the time, but that's for another video. Now, obviously, a few specific heroes did gain miraculouses themselves, such as Hercules, Perseus, and I'm forgetting the last one, but basically the mortal demigods. Hercules is the most well known, but Perseus and I'm forgetting the other one were likely holders of some miraculouses, with Hercules obviously holding the Lion Miraculous. This would have come at a much later time in his life, when he was discovering that he was the son of Zeus. And when he confronted Zeus, as well as Hera and all of the others, they agreed to give him the Lion Miraculous, but due to the jealousy of Hera, she would release tons and tons of monsters out into the world just to make sure that Hercules was destroyed, and probably all of the other mortals that would gain miraculouses. Now, obviously, they were not mortal. They were all mortals in the original. However, there are a few differences in this story. So, we're not going to go too much into depth with whether they were mortal or not. It's really dependent on what you want to look at. Then, after Hercules gained the miraculous, he would go around the entire world, basically, helping out random civilians, people who were in desperate need of help all the time. And one of the biggest reasons that he had to help people was because of the fact that Hera was using a miraculous to basically send out tons and tons of monsters, causing mass hysteria. Eventually, Hercules got sick and tired of her bullcrap and would head back to Mount Olympus, but on his way he would get injured and would meet up with the next group of miraculous holders, a group of miraculous holders who were already planning on taking on the gods of Olympus to make sure that the miraculouses were actually used by good people, not by people who would use them for their own selfish needs, which is what the gods of Olympus were doing at the time. A few obviously will survive after this. However, this is mostly good gods will survive in comparison to the bad ones. So Zeus and Hera obviously will die. Poseidon might die, along with Hades is a possibility. However, I'm actually more willing to say that Hades more than likely was on their side, just wanting to make sure that they stopped using this, because his whole mission was to guide people into a good afterlife. That's at least my theory. Hades has never been portrayed as a villain, except for in the Disney movie. However, due to the fact that they do have that Miraculous does have a business relationship with Disney, I would still say that it is still a possibility that Hades will be a villain if he is ever brought into the series. But that all depends on how exactly they want to work with this whole situation. Now, once Hercules meets up with these other miraculous holders, he meets Hippolyta, who is a well-known miraculous holder of the Ladybug Miraculous, along with probably her other compatriots from the Chinese Miraculous box. I would actually assume that at this time, all of the Miraculouses are actually in rotation, giving a few to just random people who have been helping out for years and years. Perseus would gain one, most likely something to do with the twin fish. I'm honestly not sure with Pisces, but that's a video for another day. Obviously, then there's a few others that could be in there as well, but it really doesn't matter who exactly these people were, except for the fact that Hippolyta would be one of the people who would be helping Hercules to take down these Greek gods. But on one side of the whole situation, Zeus and the others aren't the only problem. While getting up to Olympus would be a big point in their recovery of getting the Miraculouses, they wouldn't be able to gain all of them, as certain ones would more than likely still be within the Mediterranean Sea. As such, they would turn to another miraculous box, the Aquatic Miraculous box, which was more than likely given to Atlantis. Many of their heroes would be assisting in this situation. I would also assume that one of the miraculous boxes that helped out with this situation as well was more than likely the African Miraculous box. I'm uncertain if the Australian one, or the North American, the South American, or the Arctic one, the Arctic/Antarctic one, would actually be helping out with this whole situation. Mostly because of the fact that at this time, those other Miraculouses were harder to get to, and they didn't want to be dealing with that whole situation while they were gathering the Greek Miraculous box, which was going to require a lot of effort between all of them. Obviously, a few Guardians were also there to make sure that everything would go well, and they would be explaining to Hercules that if he helps them get this Miraculous box, they would introduce him to the group of Guardians. They would be taking a lot of the Miraculouses back to this place because of all this chaos. It's not the perfect time to be actually giving out Miraculouses. It's just a requirement time. Eventually, Hercules and the others make their way up to Olympus, taking down many, many of the gods, including some that were never actually given Miraculouses, but were given some special power with something similar to what the Butterfly Miraculous has. I would actually assume that the Peacock might have been taken by them, as well as possibly the Butterfly. Those two are just too easy to use. So that's actually a pretty reasonable assumption. Eventually, they would make their way through, and defeating all of these different gods would eventually make their way to the top and take on Zeus. They've gathered all of these Miraculouses so far, and they're holding on to them. They make their way up to Zeus, and Hercules and Zeus have a huge bout, eventually leading in Hercules winning the day, and Zeus declaring, "Fine, I will relinquish my guardianship over the Miraculouses and relinquish it to my son, Hercules." At which point, all of the memories of all of the gods were erased, and they were no longer aware that they were ever miraculous holders or gods. At which point, Hercules would then take the Miraculous box, put all of the Miraculouses back into it except for his own, as well as possibly Perseus, because he would have also been helping out, and whoever the other holders that were on their side would have been using. Honestly, I'm not 100% certain on this whole situation, but he would gain the Miraculous box, and with the other Guardians, take many of the Miraculouses. I would actually assume that a few of them would stay behind, such as Hippolyta. She was likely going to be keeping the Ladybug Miraculous for many more years. And they would then take those Miraculous boxes back to Tibet, where Hercules, as well as these guardians, would start to train future guardians, making the Council of the Guardians, or whatever the Guardian group is, truly be a group of people. At this point, there was no group of the Guardians. They were thinking about it, but really all it was that the different Guardians from the different areas were working together a little bit, but hardly at all. The only reason that they came together in the first place was to get back the European Miraculous box and take it to somewhere where it could be used for good, i.e. to Tibet, where it would eventually be passed on to other Guardians who would then pass the Miraculouses around to people who were actually worthy of using these Miraculouses. And this would last for many, many years to come. Unfortunately, after becoming a Guardian, Hercules would live out the rest of his days in Tibet and living with the Guardians, honestly feeling like he doesn't need to go out anymore, more than likely giving up the ability to be a Guardian pretty early on onto someone who is younger and stronger and can handle this responsibility a little bit more than he would. However, after giving it up, even though he would lose his memory of being the Guardian, he was allowed to stay in Tibet and eventually regained his memories, being told of his own stories back to him. And after learning all of this and regaining all of his memories, he would pass on, making him just a mere legend. A legend that, for many, many years to come, would be one of the greatest legends in all of the world. And that is the story of Hercules in the Miraculous universe. There are other versions of Hercules, and knowing what exactly his story was in all of these different universes is really challenging. But honestly, I feel like this story is the true way that Hercules existed in the in the Miraculous universe. As for in our universe, honestly, I'm uncertain if Hercules was actually real. While there are certain information about that time period that would make sense for who Hercules was, more than likely all Hercules was ever was simply a good Samaritan, someone who happened to be blessed with great strength and chose to use that strength in order to help people for many, many years to come. While he may have absolutely fought off terrible monsters or fought dragons or whatever, in our universe he likely was nowhere near the great strength destroying the gods situation that we think of in our day and age. So unfortunately we'll never know, but hopefully this gives you some information. But anyways, hopefully this has enlightened you. And if you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and ring that notification bell. And if you want to have more, definitely leave your thoughts down in the comments below on who you want to see next. Of course, next time, I have a little feeling on who it might be. But anyways, I have been James Johnson from History Tonight, and I will see you next time.